So a lot of people who detest Donald Trump, this election might feel like a relief. But as many people have pointed out, this was not the repudiation of Trumpism that a lot of people were hoping for. He got more votes than last time. And those 71 million people who voted for him aren't going anywhere just because Biden won. Plus the fact that 70% of them don't believe that it was a free and fair election. So they don't even think probably that Biden is a legitimate president. What interests me most about this whole US election, though, is the level of polarization and the questioning of what is true. When the Brexit vote happened, I was in a bubble who were convinced that Brexit was going to fail, that Remain would win, because no one knew anyone who thought that Brexit was a good idea. And we thought that the arguments for Brexit were based on lies and racism. And of course, the Brexit vote won. And it's the same thing with this election, that people who are against Trump can't imagine how you could possibly like someone who they think it's obvious that he is racist, sexist, narcissistic, a pathological liar, and totally incompetent at his job. The thing is, though, people who like Trump think pretty much the same thing about Biden. This idea that the label Sleepy Joe, the fact that he's a bit senile, has really caught on. People think he is incompetent, mentally incompetent. He's been accused of sexual harassment. He supported legislation which resulted in the incarceration of millions of Black Americans. So he's accused of being racist. A liar, corruption scandal around the whole thing with Ukraine. And so to the Trump supporters, it's just as obvious to them that Biden is corrupt and a terrible candidate as it is obvious to Biden supporters that Trump is corrupt and a terrible candidate. So how do we move forward from here? What's really going on? Personally, I think that if you are writing off the other side as being stupid, insane, evil, you're dehumanizing them and you're being lazy. You're not taking the time to actually understand where they're coming from. I don't claim to understand it perfectly, but at least I am trying. And the way that I look at it is what the Brexit voters had in common with the Trump voters is that they were sticking up two fingers to the establishment. They were saying, this system isn't working for us and we want it to change. So maybe rather than it being that on one side you have stupid racist Trump voters and the other side you have intelligent liberals, maybe this is really a division between people who think the system is still working and people who don't. So why might the system be seen to be not working? Well, in America, what's happened over the last few decades is, as in this country, there's been a massive increase in the cost of housing. So it's become out of reach for increasing numbers of people, a massive increase in the cost of going to college and getting a degree, and wages haven't increased to the same level. They've increased a lot more for the top 1%, and they've only increased slightly for people in the bottom 90%. So you have more and more people living at home with their parents in their 20s and 30s, thinking to themselves, I'm never going to be able to own a home. And you have parents looking at this generation thinking, this is the first generation since we can remember that is worse off than the previous generation. So what is going on? The system doesn't seem to be working anymore. And whose fault is that? Well, Donald Trump is being very clear. He's channeling their anger. I think a lot of people are very angry about this situation. He's channeling it at the people that they think are most likely to blame. The media, corrupt politicians, corrupt financiers, big tech, and immigrants. I think this also goes a long way to explaining why there are so many conspiracy theories around at the moment. It does seem like there are a small group of people who are pulling the strings and making the system work for their own advantage at the expense of the majority. I personally don't believe that that's what's going on. What I believe is that what we're seeing is not only the breakdown of the American dream, the idea that each generation will be more successful and wealthy than the previous one, I think we're seeing the breakdown of the mythology that underpins our whole understanding of reality. And this isn't my theory. This comes from the writer Charles Eisenstein, who writes about the idea that we live, every civilization lives within a mythology. They have a mythology that answers life's basic questions. Who are we? How do we relate to each other? How do we relate to the earth? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Where are we going? What's meaningful? And he calls the story that we live in currently in the West, in modern civilization, the story of separation. And in the story of separation, we are all individual, competing, discrete beings who are competing for limited resources in order to maximize our economic self-interest and our genetic self-interest. We live in a dead universe, nothing has any meaning, and everyone is basically inherently selfish. And this view is backed up by Darwin, by economic theory, even by ideas of religion, that we are separate souls encased in flesh, and psychology, that we are separate minds encased in flesh. And that's basically the mythology that we've all grown up in. And I think, and he thinks, that this mythology is breaking down. And what is replacing it is what he calls the new and ancient story of interbeing, because in many ways it's not a new idea at all. It's been around for a long time. And that is a story which says that we are all interconnected. And it's more and more not just a story, but there is science coming out that is backing this up, that we are interdependent. And in many ways, this just seems totally obvious, that what I do to you, I do to myself. If I hate somebody else, it harms me. If we harm the planet, if we harm the rainforest, if we harm the soil, if we pollute the air, it harms us. It's not an externality as they talk about in economics. It's an internality. It affects us. The political and economic systems in the US, the UK, and many other countries are based on this story of separation. And so no wonder they're breaking down. And it's no one's fault. There is no cabal of evil bad guys who are making this happen. This is just part of our evolution as a species, I think. And I think the best thing that we can do, or one of the best things we can do to ease this transition, is whenever we notice that we are hating somebody or another group of people, to question, hang on, do I really think these people are evil? Or maybe they're just perceiving things in a different way to me. They're trying to make sense of what is a very confusing world. And actually, they have a good heart. They have good intentions. And they want to be happy. They want their family and friends and their country to be happy and healthy. And maybe it's worth taking a bit of time to try to understand them and where they're coming from.